We've asked popular Myeloma Beacon weekly columnist and Millennium Ambassador Pat Killingsworth, who is a myeloma patient based in Florida, to round out our program with his inspirational presentation on being a myeloma patient and also dealing with issues of caregiving. Today, Pat continues to educate himself on his disease and the latest treatments. Pat works to educate and inspire others in the multiple myeloma community through his work as an author and blogger. In addition, as a Millennium Multiple Myeloma Ambassador, Pat hopes sharing his personal experience will motivate others to gain knowledge and information about their multiple myeloma and learn how they can live well with the disease. This was taken from the Multiple Myeloma website. We're really happy to have Pat. We thank Millennium, specifically Heather Bogart, for allowing us to share and witness what he has to say. So why don't you give a big round of applause for Pat Killingsworth.
You know, I'm just not a big microphone guy, so I think you'll all be able to hear me if I do this. Can you? Or no?
Yeah.
I would much prefer this. Okay. No pressure, inspirational. I heard educate about 5 times. I'd like to thank Millennium. Millennium paid to fly me out here from Tampa. I live just north of Tampa on the Gulf Coast. Wakey, Washington, Florida. Moved there 3 or 4 years ago from Wisconsin. If you hear a little Minnesota or Wisconsin in my voice, I'm a bad. So those Rose Bowls are killing me. We got to win the next one. But I want to thank Millennium for bringing me out. But there are, like everything in life, with something great like that, there's a cost. And you give something up. You get something, you give something up. We've all learned how that works. So I got this email from Millennium. I'm what's called a patient ambassador. I've written 3 books about multiple myeloma, a book about stem cell transplants. I'm a medical journalist, basically. I've made a career out of my cancer. I guess that's what you call making lemonade out of lemons. But since I'm here on Millennium's dime, I'm fall under a rule like a rep would have. So it's so unfair. It's so sad. Have you met Heather? Does everyone know Heather?
Stand up, Heather.
Heather, literally, forget life expectancies. I thought I'd lose mine 3 or 4 times, and she's weaving through that traffic. I got the full LA experience. This is so cool. This is wonderful. She gave up her whole day, so there we were in El Segundo this morning, and she spoke to the group there, and now I'm here. But we were talking about it, and she, these reps, there are very strict rules about what a rep can or cannot say. She's been in the pharmaceutical industry for 20 years. She knows more about all this stuff than I'll ever forget, and she can't say anything. So it's very frustrating. So the reason I'm sharing this a little bit is I wanted you to know. So I get this email from headquarters, okay? As a reminder, please use only your approved story. Oops. Where's my approved story? And defer any Velcade specific questions to Heather, so that Heather can't answer them. When answering questions around specific treatments, always think back to your training as a guide, that this was your personal journey in referring all patients to speak with their physicians. So the point is, I'm not going to fall on the sword. So if you ask me, Pat, I'm on 25 milligrams of Revlimid. Would it help if I drop down to 15? I'm not supposed to talk about that stuff. Now, when the meeting's over and we adjourn and go out or by email or by phone, I'm more than happy to, because myeloma is literally my life. And a patient's perspective, I think, is very valuable. Because everybody else gets lost and twisted between the work and the research and the time and the money. And money. So I'm more than happy to answer your questions, but I am limited somewhat in what we can talk about today. So I just wanted to share my story a little bit, but we all have stories. I mean, whether you're a caregiver and there are some caregivers here, right? Okay. Whether you're a caregiver, the patient, I mean, we all have a story. What might make mine unique a little bit is that I've pretty much gone through everything, and I'm standing to tell about it. So I suppose that's a little unique. Yes.
So what makes you lose weight so fast?
Here's a story.
That's a good
I'm
question.
down to nothing almost.
She's 90.
It's too bad you can't.
Bottle that.
I wish I could find something just to, to bring it up. I'm under 100.
My goodness. What does your physician say?
What was that?
What does your doctor say? Why?
Nothing.
Have you asked?
Yes. They don't seem to have the answer.
No, that happens a lot. I'm glad you asked. Try the nurse. Nurses, oncology nurses. They rock. They rule the
Yeah,
world.
because I used to weigh between 138 and 140. And I was always really trying to keep my weight down. But all of a sudden, I started losing weight. Then I find out I have myeloma. So I'm blaming it on that.
Well, yeah.
And it's constantly going down, and it's not going up at all.
And you were listening to the part of my opening presentation when I said I'm supposed to be answering medical questions.
So that's why I asked.
Oh, of course. And I really don't know, and I'm not a physician. But I think you need an answer. And there are three. I'm sorry, somebody else.
Oh, I'm just saying she's having a hard time hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Should I go back to the?
No, I'm sorry. That's why I'm sitting here.
Well, I'll just come over and. There are three important things I'd like to leave you with today, and that's one of them. That was number 2. I think the first is that we need to work to inform not so much your neighbor down the street. Well, I know it's frustrating. I mean, I have multiple myeloma. I mean, they couldn't have said lung cancer. They couldn't have said bone marrow cancer. We have this exotic name, and then it has to sound just like melanoma. So when your neighbor down the street comes up and says, and you say, well, I have multiple myeloma, and they say, oh, my cousin had that. The doctor burned it off or whatever, and everything's going to be fine. And they think, you got skin cancer.
Mesothelioma.
Yeah, or that one, but it's possible. By the way, you know why everyone knows what mesothelioma is?
Advertising on TV.
It's money. Sure, because there was that huge settlement that basically if you get it, you get some money. And so everybody's trying to reach out to those patients and get them involved. But I digress. And what was that you were talking about? Oh, my story. I should be able to remember my story. So they think you've got melanoma. And you sort of give up or you explain, and then you explain again. It's very frustrating. It'd be nice if they knew what myeloma was, but that's not really what I'm talking about. What I want to get at is it would be better if more medical professionals understood what myeloma is. Because, I don't know how many of us might have been diagnosed earlier had somebody known what they were looking for. I was misdiagnosed, and it was a problem. So that's one thing. The second was what this young lady brought up, that we need to be informed, active patients, not afraid to ask questions, not afraid to get a second opinion, and try to think of yourself like you're the coach or the general manager of a sports team, a soccer team, a football team, a basketball team, and you're going to build a healthcare team. So you're going to need certain members of that team, right? You're going to need your
Is it a
regular doctor. confused with, well, there really isn't bone cancer, but, you know, that's a common place where cancer would go to. But so you've got your regular doctor. You need probably a medical oncologist, maybe an acupuncturist or somebody to help you with your nutrition. But you need a myeloma specialist. And I know people say they don't, and often, you know, people get along just fine with some of these new therapies. It's good. But anytime you need a major therapy change, something's not working anymore, the myeloma is back, it's active, don't be afraid to get a second opinion. And if you haven't seen a myeloma specialist, make them a part of your team. It doesn't mean you have to drive an hour, 2 hours, or 4 hours every time you have treatment, or you have to fly to a different state. It just means that your medical oncologist is someone to consult with to help you. So that's really important. So we had those two things, and I'm almost to the third.
It gets very frustrating when you go to the doctor and they keep telling you there's nothing wrong with you.
Yes.
And finally,
Then they did find it.
I finally found a woman doctor that found out what was wrong.
So did you have an I told you so party?
I was in stage 3.
Sorry. Did you let the other physicians know they made a mistake? Did you talk to them?
California, we have Kaiser Insurance, and now we have Beaver Clinic, but it was a Beaver Clinic doctor that found out what was wrong.
Yeah, that's very frustrating. The exact same thing happened to me. Exact same. But the fact that everybody here, I mean, this is so hopeful that there would be so many people here. Because a lot of cancers, there's one treatment option, or maybe two. We were talking about that driving in the car on the way. Myeloma, 6, 8, 10 different options. Do you transplant now? Do you wait? Do you start on Velcade or Revlimid? Thalidomide. There's a new drug out, Kyprolis. What about that? Lots of questions. And I'm sorry, but a medical oncologist is treating someone with ovarian cancer, colon cancer, prostate cancer, lung cancer, pancreatic cancer, and they might have a couple myeloma patients on the side. And that's just not good enough. So I know a lot of people are stubborn. I love my doctor. I don't need a second opinion, but you just might think about bringing on a specialist to join your team. I know you got a great doctor. Yes?
I'm getting chemo now, thalidomide,
Thalidomide.
and I don't know if that helps or not.
That's a pretty good place to start. It's been around a long time. So I hope it does. But you should be hopeful because you're just starting the treatments and the statistics, the chances are that something is really going to help. So I think that's good, and I think that's a hopeful point.
What about cancer, constipation that goes with that? Bad.
Yes, it does. And actually, I just wrote a blog post about that. Let me just back up just a little bit and tell my story. When I was first diagnosed in 2007, and I was diagnosed late, stage 2 or 3. Myeloma, the stages are not that important, by the way. I mean, they really aren't. It really doesn't mean that much, but you know, you stage it just like any other cancer. And I was in bad shape. I mean, I was young, 51 years old when I was diagnosed, 2007. So I'm 56 now, and maybe that's why they weren't looking. Somebody wasn't looking for this because I had a full checkup, you know, a physical, and then I sneezed in the shower. I've been having a lot of back pain and hip pain. I sneezed in the shower. It was like somebody shot me. I flew back into it was one of these enclosed shower type deals. I literally flew back, hit the wall, could not move. My real estate, I was a realtor. My wife and I were the Patty team. You know, one of those deals, 100 houses listed, you can sell your house. And I was getting ready to show some property, and I had to call my real estate assistant to come help me out of the shower. I mean, I don't think that's in her job description. I mean, I just could not move. And it started this downward spiral. And when they finally figured out what was going on, and my radiation oncologist showed me slide by slide, slice by slice of the MRI of what my neck, and back, and rib, I mean, I had missed it. My bones look like Swiss cheese.
Yeah.
I mean, now I'm only an inch and a half or 2 inches shorter. Yeah, I saw you coming in. I have a friend who's 7 inches shorter now than when he was diagnosed. 7 inches. And it was hard. And there was a problem. One physician didn't know that the other physician had me on a steroid, of which you all probably know the name. Yes, Demodex, right? My specialist didn't know that my radiation oncologist, who was, I mean, I had lesions of plasmacytomas called oozing out between 8 or 10 vertebrae. I mean, it looked like, I'm watching this thing, these pictures, and it looked like a horror film, you know, like The Blob or something. I just couldn't believe it, and unfortunately I was on all of this medication. The one doctor didn't know, the other one had me on. The radiation oncologist forgot to take me off. The other physician, when I was handed off, didn't even know I was on it. I didn't know what it did. Now I'm a pretty educated guy. I mean, I was a teacher, and I was a drug and alcohol counselor, actually, and I didn't know what was keeping me up at night. I didn't know why I was getting up at 5 every morning. I didn't know a lot of things, and it gave me, it was making me sick. That with radiation was just making me sick. I was in horrible, horrible, horrible shape. And once I got through a lot of that, make a long story short, and started to come out of the haze caused by the drug and the fact somebody just told you you were going to die in 43 months, you know, 3-4 years.
43 months.
That's what they told me. 43. That was the median life expectancy for someone stage 2 or 3 of my age. And this was Mayo Clinic, by the way. I was at Mayo, up in Rochester, Minnesota. It was about 2 hours from my home. So you come out of all of that, and the next thing they say is you got to have a stem cell transplant. Well, what the heck is that? And I started looking into it, and I didn't like that idea. That didn't sound like it was going to be fun. You know, it all happens too fast, and they're pushing, pushing, pushing. One of the nice things about myeloma is you don't have to go fast. Once somebody gets a handle, like it's unfortunate you were diagnosed so late, but your physician has 3 or 4 or 5 different drugs that they can use if the thalidomide doesn't work. And so 100% of, basically 100% of patients initially are going to respond to something. So this is good. So once you get through that, you need to take a step back, don't you? You need to think about all this. Now, unfortunately, I know a lot about myeloma now. I didn't then. Then is when I needed to know a lot about multiple myeloma. And that's why we have groups like this to share the information, and that's why we have speakers like me. I'm not sure so much to inspire as to remind everybody that information is power. And it's important that we educate ourselves, or that our caregiver is educated about some of these options, and that we get specific help. So my wife, we don't have children, by the way. At age 34, my wife was diagnosed with cervical and uterine cancer. And she made it through surgery, she made it through. They left her ovaries. She was only 34. That's a long time to go without the hormones that the ovaries produce. And so, of course, you know where this is going. 6 years later, ovarian cancer. She had her ovaries removed, and then she needed the big-time chemo. Now, this is 12 years ago. And 12 years ago, they basically gave you as much as they could without killing you. I mean, things are much better now. By the way, as a sideline, I hear myeloma patients complain about things like dexamethasone and and the side effects quite often. But I mean, next to a lot of the chemotherapy for other cancers, unless you have an unusual adverse reaction to one of these drugs, hers isn't so bad. I mean, I know that's not fair. What do you mean? But you know, so basically, I watched my wife roll up into a fetal position and lay on the couch for 4 days. And she had to go in for 6 months. And by the 4th or 5th month, she's saying, Pat, I can't go, I don't want to go, I'm not going to go, I can't go. I said, what am I supposed to say? Hon, you've got to go. So, I mean, I've been a caregiver. Also, I understand, and now ironically, she takes care of me. And I'm fortunate to even be able to walk if you look at those films, and I'm very fortunate to be able to be here today to speak to you. But I just understand what this can do to your life. And it's great that there's so many people here to know that you're not alone. And that's important, because this is a very difficult thing. By the way, I did not get a stem cell transplant at the time. I was sort of a pioneer. You know, the doctor said get a transplant, but my medication worked so well that I was in complete response. And I'm like, so why would I get a transplant? And I waited. And then the myeloma came back 4 years later. That would have been the start of 2010. And it's funny, you know, I don't know, as everyone talks when you're in a group, is the group always this large?
Recently, you know, we've had some good speakers like yourself,
Wow.
Dr. Jury, Dr. Vesio.
Oh, Dr. Jury, me. Good.
Okay, you're a good company.
But as you all get a chance to talk, have you noticed how myeloma is like different for everybody?
Yeah.
My kidneys are perfect, thank God. You know, that's one thing. Some people have no bone involvement at all. They can get their M spike or their IgG or whatever can go off the charts and they're fine.
Go play golf.
Mine gets to like, my M spike gets to like 0.5 or 0.6 if you follow the M spike thing. At least some of you. Thank you. And you could tell.
I just needed water.
And I purposely didn't take Dex this week so I wouldn't get Dex poison. But for some reason, I just get a little bit of active myeloma and it goes right to the bones. So I've been fine for 2.5, 3 years. Life is normal. Life is good. You forget. And you know, it's funny. Myeloma is my life. I mean, I write about it. I get emails from New Zealand and Japan and, you know, Great Britain, but you separate it. You know, humans, we have this amazing ability to compartmentalize stuff. So you think, I'm fine. It's been 2, 3, 4 years. And then the myeloma comes back and it's active again. And just a little bit, bam, inch lesion in my hip. Same hip, I had a huge one before. And they do a PET scan on me, right? And there are hot spots, like a lot of them. My skull, the back of my neck where I had a lot of damage. A kid with people, and Heather, you didn't know this, but if I got in an accident out there, like the car would go this way and my head would go that way. I mean, I don't think there's much holding my, oh, I'm sorry, I'm teasing you, I hope. She's actually a great driver.
Slowing down.
Yeah, she's a great driver. No, she is. But, you know, there's just not much there. And, I mean, it got my attention. I said, okay, now it's time for the transplant. It's been 4 years. So I had a transplant, an autologous stem cell transplant, my own cells that had been harvested at Mayo, because that's really great advice. You go through that treatment, things are working. If you want to wait, get those cells harvested. I got my cells harvested. They're ready to go. So I had an auto transplant. I went through it. It is no fun. How many of you have had a transplant? And they're not fun. And we could all describe what we went through. It's like myeloma. Everybody, a little different for everybody. But on a scale of 1 to 10, I suppose, I hate that word. You know, if the doctor ever says it's tolerable, just head for the door. You ever pick that up? Oh, it's tolerable. But in my experience, I mean, if I needed, I would do it again. I mean, it wasn't any fun, but it was okay. So I sailed through, everything's great. It didn't work. It made it worse. My myeloma got worse. I went in with like nothing, a clear bone marrow biopsy, nothing. And I come out and my myeloma is worse. It's right back to where I get these lesions. But fortunately, I went on the same therapy, the same drug regimen that I used before the transplant to get me ready, to call it induction. Well, if the transplant doesn't work, or doesn't work as well as they thought, they don't say it doesn't work or it didn't work as well as they thought. They call it consolidation. So, same therapy, but now it's consolidation therapy. So I'm on this therapy, and it worked great. So right now, fortunately, I am, yes, and I find out officially here next week. But it's funny, one lab has me no myeloma, and the other lab still has like a 0.1. I think that's interesting. So I'm going to the tough lab at Moffitt, where my specialist is, to find out next week. But it doesn't matter. The point is it's under control. The transplant probably wasn't a waste, because the drugs that had started to stop working before seem to be working again, almost like someone pressed a reset. It's just such an odd disease. It's such a strange cancer. Sorry, you had a question.
So are you just on Dex now, or are you on?
No, I'm on a full therapy still, and hopefully going to go to maintenance. Following the rules, I'm not telling you exactly what it takes.
Did you
Probably
go
figure it
maintenance
out.
after you went, got all your numbers down?
I'm sorry.
Initially, did you go on maintenance?
Yes, and that's the other thing. I've never been off something. I think it's a combination of the patient, you see that a lot, or the physician. You know, if ain't broke, don't fix it kind of mentality. So I never took an extended drug holiday. Probably should have. My plan was after my transplant, had it worked like we expected it would, I was a perfect candidate, I would have gone on a drug holiday and I would not have used maintenance. These are tough decisions. When to transplant, to use or not to use maintenance. I know. And again, I think they're decisions that a lot of cancer patients don't have to face.
You guys any idea why things got worse after the transplant?
No, they just said I was part of a 2 or 3%. Lucky me. And that's the thing about these percentages, you know, that the group this morning that we were talking to, it was a wonderful experience. It was a smaller group, and we sat in a circle and we just talked about stuff. And, you know, the people in that group were all doing pretty well. And we've got to remember that there are patients that can't get here, that aren't doing well, or that don't make it. And unfortunately, just because you're well educated, even if you do everything right, sometimes the myeloma wins. But I will tell you that it's worth the fight, and it's worth trying to stave that baby off and keep that evil myeloma monster away from your door for just a little while longer. Because I'm so fortunate that I get to travel all around the country and meet and interview, like Dr. Dury. I've had a consult with Dr. Dury. Anthony said that he spoke here recently.
Right.
And so I learn a lot and I hear a lot. And I get a chance to talk to these guys. And I meet a lot of patients. And I've met patients that have lived 14, 16, 18, 22, 23, 24 years. And the one takeaway point that they all make, the one thing to remember that they tell you is, if your therapy is working, stick with it. Even if it's just holding things sort of steady, or it's slowly creeping up. And they used this one patient I'll never forget. Let's see, 19 years. I'm trying, because I'm figuring when I talk to her, there've been years added on. She's still alive now, it's 19 years. At the time, it was 18 years. And the advice she gave me, and she used a horse analogy. And she said, you've got to ride that horse till it drops. And when it gets up, you got to get on and ride it again. And the point she was making is this. I had a very good friend. I didn't know I had multiple myeloma. I had it 3 or 4 years before I was even diagnosed. And a very good friend who had it. It's just ironic. We were on a board together. My wife and I were big animal people, so it was the shelter board. And he was going to Mayo Clinic, and he had a tumor or something in his head. And he had multiple myeloma. I just didn't know what it was at the time. I mean, I hadn't been diagnosed yet. I barely paid attention. He was a nice guy. And I felt bad, and he had to, resign from the board, and he went to Mayo. and we became friends. And it was interesting. He lived 12 years. 12 years. Had all kinds of complications and problems. Everything he tried, it would work like 8 or 9 or 10 months. He would have a stem cell transplant, and it would work 8 or 9 months. He'd try the next new drug, say thalidomide, and it would work 8 or 9 months. And then he'd try something else. And then he'd go back to another one, and it would work 8 or 9 months. And he made it over 12 years that way. Lauren was quite a guy. He was a really good guy. And that's sort of the point that this long-lived patient was sharing. That you gotta take every day, every week, every month you can get. And so if something's working, stick with it. And if it's worked and stops working, and you use something else, try going back to it after you've taken a little bit of a break, after you've done something else. And quite often it will work again, probably not as well. Educated patient. It's just so hopeful. When I was diagnosed, 43 months, I've written 3 books. My first book was Living with Multiple Myeloma. And I think it's sort of colorful because I've had some stories to tell. You can guess that. But the thing I like about it is it describes my decision about whether to transplant or not transplant and what I went through. And I think, it's a neat book. But choices, it's all about the choices. And when I was diagnosed, they gave me 43 months. That was the median, even if you're healthy. That's Mayo Clinic saying that. Now, more than twice that. So a newly diagnosed patient walking in an office right now, they're going to say 7 or 8 years, 10 years, maybe longer. And the truth is, nobody knows. And we have more treatment options, better care. I just find it to be incredibly hopeful. I live my life, though sort of a personal tip, I live my life 2 years at a time, in 2-year increments. I don't know why. I was always a deferred gratification guy, but now, if it's going to be more than 2 years out, I'm just not interested. Because that last scare after the transplant, the myeloma, that really got my attention. And I thought I had months, or maybe a year or so. And it really changed my perspective. And I'll never take that for granted again. And so now, 2 years. And I believe this treatment, and if you look at the statistics, what I'm doing now should last 1.5 years, 2 years. If I'm lucky, a little longer. And then I'm going to do what Lauren did. I'm going to try the next thing. And we're going to combine, we're going A, B, and C. We're going to take D and combine it with B and C. Myeloma is relentless. And it adapts. And someone, please God, someone, somewhere has to come up with a way to unlock the key to myeloma's ability to become drug resistant. because that's the problem, right? It adapts and it changes and eventually it wears you down. But it's not, I mean, it's like almost anything works. You could take chemotherapy that's used for liver cancer, and there's a shot it's gonna, knock your myeloma back for a little while. Steroids, by themselves, if you're first diagnosed, most likely will help your myeloma. It's relentless and it keeps coming. But you know what? I think we can do that too. I think we can be strong. It's not fair, but we can be strong. And we can hold this thing back. We may not beat it, but I'll tell you, when I was first diagnosed, they said I had 6 months. They thought it was, my films looked so bad, they thought it was metastasized bone cancer. And they gave me 6 months. And now I'm 5 years, and I'm thinking 2 years, and 2 years after that, and 2 years after that. And that's the best we can do. That's the best we can do, but we need help, and we need a healthcare team to do it. And I just want to thank you so much for letting me share my story today. And now I'll be glad to answer questions unspecifically. And yes. I be in a world of hurt, so thank you. Thank you very much.
I want to thank Pat for a very inspirational, very inspiring talk about his personal experiences about myeloma, things that we can all take to heart. Well, again, we've had a very, very successful meeting. I hope you will take away with us good information that you'll be able to use. Before we adjourn, are there any questions anyone has? All right, I'm glad you came. I hope it helped. We'll see you next month. Take care. Drive safe.